Well, hello. This is the last session for Senior Bible looking at New Spiritualism. I hope you guys are ready to be moved on from this one, just like I am, and moved on to other things. New Spiritualism is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting ones that we look at because I think that it is one of the bigger threats to us as Christians. Things like communism, we've been raised to hate that, and you know, not give into that. Things like secularism, we've been raised to see those things and understand those arguments from a young age. Things like New Spiritualism, though, are creeping into our society more and more each day. Things like postmodernism are creeping into our churches more and more each day. And so those two are two of the ones that, you know, I find more interesting because I feel like they're closer to being at our doorstep than things like communism and secularism are. Today we're going to talk about the source of revelation for a new spiritualist. Last week we looked at a bit of a reminder on the four tenets or four basic thoughts of New Spiritualism. Then we also looked at their view of the origins of the earth and of the universe. Today we're going to look at their source of revelation and some things that they believe about humanity. For them, they believe that we have our own source of revelation deep within us, and all of that can be accessed through deeper thinking. They believe that instead of looking to things like holy books and holy texts to become smarter and to be more in tune with the divine, they believe that it's just a bit of introspection, that the more we think and the more introspective we are, the more godlike we will become. And really, we've talked about that a little bit in the four basic teachings of New Spiritualism. Instead of looking to holy books, they believe that we should trust the universe. For me personally, and for you, you should believe that that every understanding and every revelation that is meaningful comes from God, that we look to Him for the ultimate answers in our lives, that while the Bible doesn't have every little answer that you could search for, you know, for instance, it's not going to tell you the exact name of the person that you're going to marry. It's not going to tell you the exact name of the company that you're going to work for once you get out of college. It's not going to tell you the name of the college you need to go to. Well, the Bible doesn't have the minutia of little answers. It does have all of the big answers to the universe and to life and to understanding who God is. So we look to it for our source of revelation, or our source of understanding of the unknown or the unseen. For the New Spiritualists, they believe that we should let the universe speak to us. They say to trust the universe, trust and believe and have faith. The truth is that the universe has been answering you all of your life, but you cannot receive the answers unless you are aware. So much like their understanding of growing in introspection and growing in your knowledge of yourself, we should grow also in our awareness of the universe, and that bit of consciousness that connects us in our divinity. It should also connect us to the universe. We talked last week about the idea of Pandora, or you know, what you saw in the movie Avatar. Pan being, or a pantheist, that everything is God. Well, if everything is God, if the universe is God and I am God, and my consciousness can be connected to it, then I need to find ways to connect to the universe, to grow in my understanding of the universe and let it speak to me. Obviously, it flies in the face of what we believe as Christians, where we believe that divine authority and revelation is seen in the scriptures, and we need to connect our consciousness to that and what God has said in order to understand the world around us. They believe that we can also become more aware of these things through meditation and channeling. We talked last week about how meditation, or the emptying of your mind, and yoga are practices that they used. Another thing that they believe is channeling, meaning that when they practice meditation, sometimes they use certain crystals or mantras or icons in order to help them achieve higher thinking. Me personally, I don't know all the ins and outs of what it means for them to practice these types of things, but I'll give you a very similar idea that invaded the church about 1,000 years ago and officially became adopted doctrine of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and that is the use of icons. We call it iconography. if you've ever been to, an old Catholic church, or more specifically, an Eastern Orthodox church, you may have run into some of this. Very few Catholic churches have this, but I would consider the image of the suffering Christ on the cross to be very similar to what we're talking about here. For icons in the Eastern Orthodox Church, they were usually things like paintings or artwork, statues, things like that. They could be of Jesus, of saints, of Mary, religious artifacts, basically. And in the Eastern Orthodox practice, they would include these icons in their worship, and they would use these icons to help grow their faith, basically. Now, I want to be really careful in how I say this, because I don't think that having images and having statues and all of that is a bad thing. For St. Paul, I think that we should revere him. For St. Patrick in Ireland, I think we should revere him. Me being Irish in heritage, I have a special affection for St. Patrick. I carry a 4-leaf clover around in my Bible that my wife picked for me. Why? Because St. Patrick is one of my favorite church fathers to learn about. But at the same time, I don't need to worship him. I don't need to pray to him. I don't need to do anything like that. While it is different in its essence of what new spiritualists are doing, I do think that it's closely connected if we use these icons as sources of worship. We can appreciate them. We can appreciate the artwork, the message behind a painting or an icon or something like that. But in no way should we include that as part of our worship experience. I think that it could move us to worship when we think of things like, for instance, a guy like St. Patrick who, was taken captive by Irish people, enslaved in Ireland for a long time, and then eventually escaped, got his freedom, moved back to England, and his heart was so moved for his captors that he went back to Ireland to minister to them and share the gospel with them. And now most of Ireland is Irish Catholic. Well, hey, that should move my heart to worship in a sense, because he's exhibiting an attitude of Jesus. But I don't worship St. Patrick. You see what I'm saying? I hope that you do. I hope that this makes sense. For the new spiritualists, though, they will use these crystals or these icons, these mantras, to help in their emptying of their mind and to help them gain their divine understanding of the universe. We have to be very careful as Christians not to include things in worship that don't need to be included. The second commandment is don't make for yourselves any graven images. The sin that the Israelites committed when Moses was coming down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments, and he saw them below, was the sin of the golden calf. Well, guys, one thing that we often overlook in that story, they weren't worshiping a calf thinking it was God. They were worshiping the one true God, as the scriptures say, but they wanted a God that they could see. They wanted to worship him through a mode in which they could see and touch, and in some instances even smell. Well, even though he represented the one true God, they were doing the exact thing that God told them not to do, because God can't be represented through a physical thing. The closest representation of that we get is when he puts on flesh and lives as Jesus. But anything aside from that, we've got to be very, very careful. You've heard me mention it before. I think we should even approach with caution the idea of the cross being in our worship. We do not worship an inanimate object. We do not worship a tree. We worship the God who died on the tree. And so we have to be very careful, even with images of the cross or of the grave. We have to keep in right perspective why we worship and what we worship. Another thing that new spiritualists will use in their basically worship of the universe, or their understanding of the universe, is Ouija boards. They will do firewalking, astrology, aura readings, palm readings, stuff like that. Things like you might see at like a fortune teller. The channeling specifically is where disembodied spirits presumably speak through a fortune teller or through a medium. And the reason why they do this, the reason they use things like Ouija boards and aura readings or palm readings, is simply because they want to be connected to spirits, because they believe that the spirits of people who have gone on, who have reached nirvana, can still speak to us and give us an understanding that is necessary for us to achieve this higher order of thinking. When it comes to their thoughts of humanity, they believe that humans aren't unique individuals, but that we are all basically one individual that's connected through our consciousness, that all knowledge exists in the God-likeness that is within us. So the more we think and the more we are introspective and the more that we grow in our understanding of ourselves, the more we are going to understand the universe because we're part of the universe. Rhonda Byrne, a famous New Ageist, said this: "You are God in a physical body. You are spirit in the flesh. You are eternal life expressing itself as you. You are a cosmic being. You are all power. You are all wisdom. You are intelligence. You are perfection. You are magnificence. You are the creator, and you are creating the creation of you on this planet." Well, I hate to break it to Ms. Byrne, but I can't think of anything more blasphemous than that, saying that we are God. Guys, as Christians, I hope that we can see the lunacy of a statement like this. God calls us to empty ourselves of ourselves and fill ourselves with Him because we are so corrupt and so vile and so wrong that we can't really do anything apart from Him. It's in Him that we have our life and have our being. It's Him who fills our breath with lungs, fills our lungs with breath, excuse me. Wouldn't you know that something that's going to be on the internet when I'm 12 minutes into a lecture is going to have a statement as silly as He fills our breath with lungs. I hope that you got a good chuckle out of that. They believe that there's no such thing as human sinfulness. They believe that evolution shows us that we aren't fallen, but rather are evolving upward. That's, of course, what they believe in regards to reincarnation, that we're evolving from down here to a place that is up here and transcends the lower life form that we once were. They believe that the only sin is failing to reach higher thinking. And so because of that sin, you would be punished and reincarnated as a lower life form or as a equal life form. They believe that we all have an ego or a negative inner state that we must get rid of to reach spiritual growth and not be miserable. They believe that in regards to how we should live, if something is wrong, it's because we wish that it were so, or we would will it to be so. So for instance, they believe that if somebody has cancer, it's because that person ultimately wants to have cancer. If somebody is depressed, it's because somebody ultimately wants to be depressed. If somebody has lost their job because of coronavirus, it's because somebody ultimately wanted to lose their job. If somebody dies, I guess they would have to logically conclude that that's because that's what that person wanted. For everything that's wrong, it's because we will it to be so. So the way forward is to rid ourselves of individuality, of negativity, and ego. They believe that aloofness is the only response to human suffering. That if we want to be set free from this, then we need to separate from everybody else and what they are going through in hopes that we ourselves could be set free from that. Well, it's really funny to me because if they want to separate themselves from individuality, of negativity, and of ego, separating yourself from the rest of humanity and what they're going through, that sounds like the opposite of what they're trying to achieve, because I can't think of anything more selfish than wanting to separate myself from somebody who's going through a tough time. If somebody is walking through a season of depression or walking through an illness, the most selfless thing that I can do for that person is to give myself to that person in a way that meets their need. Again, this is where the new spiritualist argument falls apart. They also believe that the law of karma implies that if a person's misery helps cleanse him or her of negative karma, then helping alleviate suffering would hinder the cleansing process. There you can see how this is a conflict of interest based on what they said earlier. It's not consistent. So, you know, for karma to have its full effect, they have to let it bring suffering. Otherwise, you're not going to be cleansed. Again, I don't know where they come up with this stuff. Regarding new spirituality and Christianity or any other religion, New spirituality is very critical of religion, especially those focused upon sin and salvation, because they view such an approach as utopian. They do not want to be told that sin is an issue, that you can't do certain things, that you can't love certain people, or exhibit your love for many people, or things like that. They don't want to be told that they're sinners in need of salvation, because they don't believe in any sin other than what we just talked about. And they also don't believe in a salvation experience. They just believe that you reach nirvana through higher thinking. They reject the idea of a personal God, the deity of Christ, the special revelation of the Bible, and sin as well. That's going to conclude this lecture on the end of new spirituality and how they view humanity. I hope that you got a lot out of this. I hope that you got a good chuckle about my comment regarding how God fills our breath with lungs, and I hope that I haven't lost your respect because of it. I hope that you have a great day and a great week. If you have any questions, of course, please don't hesitate to contact me. Be sure to check your Google Classroom for more updates on your assignments throughout the week. So, New Spiritualist unit test will be on Monday of next week, and you'll want to make sure that you're prepared, because it's not going to quite be like the tests that we've had. It is open note. It is open resource. You're welcome to use the videos, any other resources that we've had throughout the year, and I hope that you do well. So praying for you guys. Love you, miss you, and hope to see you soon.